Hello and welcome back to RP-1. Today we are going to be working on another set of contracts like we did in the previous episode. We're going to just focus on one type of contract, and today that is going to be the biological experiments. So as we come here and take a look at our projects, or our programs, we're going to be going into satellites here pretty soon. So we're going to want to pick up one of these, probably the light satellites, just because that's probably going to be easier than the heavy satellites at the beginning, I imagine. But we're also going to finish up our suborbital research program today. But I figured we'll grab that program to just give us a little extra funding to make sure that we can do everything that we need to do. And I have a little bit of science to spend, and so I'm just going to take a look and see what is available here. I don't know why, but I feel like these solid boosters could be useful. Like, in my stock KSP, I don't use solid boosters all that much, but I've been finding some use out of them in the RP-1 series. So just come here and take a look at our contracts, and we have the biological experiment and then the advanced biological experiment, and we should be able to finish up this program of suborbital research. So we went ahead and take that contract, and then we're going to go ahead and come into the VAB and start designing our first rocket. And this is going to take just the regular biological capsule, not the advanced one, but the small rodent size biological capsule, and we're going to try to get it to break the Kármán line, see how rodents do in space. So first we're going to get our probe core set up. This does need to be a science core as opposed to a guided rocket, but we'll be adjusting that soon enough. And with this series, I'm focusing a lot on the building aspect of it. I'm going to be going through several different iterations of each of these designs, and I end up reusing the sounding rocket that we've been using thus far. But I like to keep in all of my attempts because you can kind of see how the build process goes and how thinking about certain problems and trying to address them can change your design and everything. Like, so for this instance, we grabbed the Arob B3, which was our highest performing sounding rocket. And we put that on there, but of course we need to add some payload to it, and so we're trying to figure out how the best way to do it by putting it into the probe core in the nose. That was one option. But it does make the nose pretty funky. So I go ahead and just redo that, reload the craft, and I decide to move that over and just make its own little holding tank for the payload. And since we have different sizes on all of our pieces, because the biological capsule is slightly larger than the rocket we have tooled currently. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust the parachute so it can be rated correctly for the new payload. And go ahead and check my experiments just to see if I have anything new to put on there, and I do, the mass spectrometer. I get rid of the rest of the experiments because I believe we've actually reached the limit of the science that we can gain from that. And then I go ahead and give it a little paint job, I adjust the staging, and we're going to go ahead and give this a little test flight and see how it runs. And then when we come back, we're going to make the changes necessary. And on this run, if you see, our center of lift was in front of our center of mass, and the rocket flipped on over, so we needed to adjust the wings to accommodate for the new weight on the craft, being the biological experiment. So that was a good test flight, but I wanted to do one more. And now, before we get ourselves ready, we're going to play around with an idea to see if we can get a little bit more height on this. I decided to make it 3 stages with a quick SRB at the very last stage to kind of give it that last little push. But I didn't like it. I didn't like how unstable the rocket became with that. So there was no point really in it. I don't think it gave us anything. But we also noticed that we had not extended our tank well enough, that we were actually underburning. We weren't burning for as long as we possibly could. And so extending this, the length of this tank made all the difference in the world. And so it is now ready. We are going to go ahead and name it the Arob B3 BE, standing for biological experiment. And it's on the Arob B3 rocket, so there we have. So let's go ahead and tool this. Let's create a launch complex for it, and then let's put it in our build order. Once the launch complex is complete, we're going to go ahead and launch this. There we go. We sped up the process on the launch complex, made the engineers work a little overtime. That's okay. So we're going to put 2 of these into the launch queue just for a little bit of redundancy, just in case something goes wrong with the first one, if an engine fails or what have you. So now it is launch day. So let's get ourselves ready. So now, for the 2 launches that we have in this episode, I'm going to leave them for the majority uncut, unedited. Just so, we can see the whole process. These are new launches and new contracts that we're doing. So I wanted to keep everything above board and let the shareholders know that their rockets are going off without a hitch. So we're going to go ahead and get all this information up, take up the majority of the screen. So that way we can see the performance of each engine. There we go. The SRB, the Aerojet, went off without a hitch, went perfectly, nominally, if you will. And I can't remember if we added this in the last episode or not, but we now have the HD Cape Canaveral, so we have a lot more interesting looking things on the ground. We're also going to be using Flight Recorder a little bit more to kind of keep an eye on the graphs of things such as our angle of attack, our delta V, our mass, our orbital speed, the altitude, all sorts of different things that we can kind of keep an eye on and check. There's not really much we can do about it, but it does give me an idea of like if something fails, what were the conditions at the point that it failed, or when we stage our rocket, what does that do to the acceleration? What does that do to the mass? So more information is always helpful. So now this part that you've been watching for a little bit right now is actually sped up footage. We're just there wasn't much to look at. It's just an Arob rocket and a bunch of numbers, so I figured we'll just speed it up a little bit. I didn't feel like cutting it. I just wanted to kind of let it play out, and you can see the graph go, and it's nice. And then soon we meet our apoapsis, our desired apoapsis. However, we could have we staged a little too early. We could have kept that on and used a little bit more of the momentum of the lower stage to push us forward, and then we could have separated once we reach space. But you live and you learn, or you live at any rate. So this is just going to coast upwards until we hit the 140 kilometer mark. Kármán line reaching space. And so now we are past that, and we will be time warping soon to kind of just get to the tip. But I do end up time warping a little too fast, so we just rocket through and pass our apoapsis and return back to the Kármán line before we know it. But we are getting some pretty good science out of this, and as long as we can safely return the capsule, the rodent that's in there, then we can ask him how space was and what it was like to be a rat in space. So that's good. We need to bring this little guy back. Because if we can't bring a rodent back, what hope do we have of bringing a Kerbal? And as you see, I wiggled my mouse over our electric charge. We hardly used any of that, and so as far as I'm concerned, that's a huge waste that we should pay attention to in the future. We don't necessarily need to have the most amount of battery possible on a simple sounding rocket like this. We're just going to watch it tumble a little bit. And at about 1,500 meters, the parachutes deploy. And they start significantly slowing us down. And then about 500 meters, they pop open completely. And now we are coming down at a safe speed. We should have no problems recovering this capsule. 70, 60, 40, 30, 20. There we go. At 24 meters above sea level, we have made contact with the Earth. So we're going to go ahead and recover it, and as you saw, we completed that contract. We got a whole mess of science from that as well. So now I still don't have enough for the advanced material science or the satellite era stuff, so we're just going to go ahead and make another launch because we're going to want more of that. And this time we now have the capstone mission for the suborbital research program. So once we finish this, getting the advanced biological capsule out, we are going to start focusing on other things, maybe possibly going orbital with our first satellite. But for now, we're going to take this contract, and we're going to utilize our Dr. 500 that we used for the camera. It was a good lifting vehicle. It can get us downrange quite a bit, and so we're going to just repurpose that for the new biological experiment contract. So let's go ahead and put our container full of our sounding payload in there. Thankfully it's not too much, so we don't have to make this big monstrosity. We're going to set up our probe core, set up our upper stage, and now I'm going to want to put a cone of some sort on here. I don't want to put it into a fairing because I want to make sure that it can actually run the experiment. So I just kind of put this little aerodynamic cone on there. And then soon I realized I could get a little more science with this. Let's throw in a small capsule as well, you know, and get a monkey and a rat, or a hamster and a dog. So we're going to name this the Dr. 500 BE for biological experiment. And you may see something a little strange here, and at the top of my screen it says simulation. And I mentioned before that we're not going to be showing the simulations, we're only going to be showing the actual launches. However, in my recording, something happened and the actual launch itself, the footage, was corrupted and I couldn't use it. So I'm going to use the simulation footage to show you that the rocket does work and we can achieve our goals with it. So in the next episode, when you notice that we have completed the biological experiment, it's not a question of how we did that, because we used this rocket right here. So sadly, I wish I could just show you the real footage of it, but we're just going to watch the simulation, and we're going to watch it to completion, like I mentioned with the other launch, the Arob B3 BE, that this is something new, and wanted to show you how it gets done. But overall, it's going to be a pretty standard launch, pretty standard for RP-1 and very standard for stock KSP. Just pitching slightly to the east, following the prograde, staging our separators when we need to, and hoping for the best. A little bit about this rocket. We have A4s for the lifters, and then we have the upgraded A10 for the main booster. And the reason why we have them separated like that is because if we were to have all A10s on there, they wouldn't really be side boosters at that point. They would, because they would run out of fuel at the same time that the center thruster does. So we have different engines here. The A4s have less experience. We have less data on the A4s than we do have on the A10. So if anything's going to fail, the side boosters would. And I do have my simulations with enable parts failures. At least this one I know I did. So there is the chance that the simulation will go off incorrectly, but I mean, I'm gonna spoil it a little bit. It doesn't. Everything works well in this simulation. So, but the idea is that, you know, we can still have problems here. So now we're about 45 degrees, looking nice. And pretty soon the side boosters flame out, and we go ahead and stage them. And so now we're at a high enough altitude, and our rocket has a low enough mass that this engine should be more than enough to push us what we need for our goal. I'm hoping that this rocket itself, the lower stage, the Dr. 500, will be able to continue on with us into the next program, into light satellites, and hopefully this can be our lifting stage for that. But we're going to have to do a lot of trial and error with that. Figure out where things are going to go. It is, I do want to apologize for such a slow release on the RP-1 episodes. Just, it does take quite a lot of time and energy and effort trying to get these things to work. There's a lot of test flights going back and over again. I'm working on the first contract of the not suborbital, but the first contract of the orbital rockets, the satellites. And I already have over 10 hours of footage of just the build process alone that I'm going to go through and kind of shorten up and do that. But I won't be able to get that episode out until we can successfully complete that contract. Because once again, that's going to be the goal for this series, is that each episode will have a contract that it completes. So I don't have too much fuel left, but I did decide to tip over and go completely horizontally around the 75-85 kilometer mark, so that way we can push our trajectory out forward and get some distance on this instead of just some height. And with that, our engine is out of juice. We go ahead and stage. Once again, I could have staged that a little bit later than I did, but it's okay. So because we're not in space yet, our advanced biological capsule hasn't started producing any science, but our regular biological capsule, the small one, is working away, and that's good. So not only will this complete the contract, but we will get quite a bit of science out of it. So this time I remember not to time warp too fast so we can actually see how the probe core and the animals make it through the atmosphere. And thankfully, when we came back into the atmosphere, we are so close to our retrograde icon that we can easily start pointing that way. And one of the fun things about this particular design that I made is that the sounding payload only needed to be on the rocket during its coast. It doesn't actually need to come back with us. So in essence, it kind of acted like a heat shield. Same with this probe core. It's keeping the heat off the parachutes and off the biological experiments. And so, we shouldn't have access to heat shields, but this is doing us wonderfully. And then once I see that the heating effects are gone, I realize that this is going to work, that the parachute is rated well enough, it's going to deploy at the appropriate time, so I don't have to worry about that. All that I really had to worry about was whether or not it would explode upon re-entry through the atmosphere. And since it proved that it didn't, I'm going to actually call this test successful. We're going to revert it, and then this is when I'm going to run it for real, and then we did run it for real, and we did it successfully, and everything is good. But for now, this is where I'm going to leave you. This is where I'm going to leave today's episode. We're going to go ahead and tool this rocket. As you see here, we're going to tool it and put it in our load order, and everything will be great. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP-1. And if you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment. Let me know what I'm doing right. Let me know what I'm doing wrong. If you had any tips, I would love to hear them. But I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.